Hi, Jeremiah. Hi, Robert.
We love solving impossibly hard problems. Model to predict the future of cybersecurity.
Hat and the whole idea of warranties, and there's been a bunch of these.
Yes, and
yeah.
you came first with the lecture about XSS.
Yeah.
That's which you discovered.
The idea is if the adversary is ahead of defense, and defense rises to meet them, the adversary has a future. Robert wrote the book on the topic of AI.
Yes, that's it's here, right? That's the book that Robert wrote.
I think that's really proving out that the alignment theory is incredibly impossible. There's not one single country, like even Switzerland, it's just like truly neutral and friends with everybody. I mean, there's just no such thing, which I think is a terrible idea. All kinds of bad reasons. Like, just don't do that. This is more like an RBAC solution.
How does AI change for the threat model?
A developer's job is most of the time not to ship secure software. Their job is to ship product that works, because no one's incentive.
And in the industry as well, like subrogation lawsuits are coming from these insurance.
Hi, Jeremiah. Hi, Robert. Thank you very much for joining today's show. Most of us know you very well. However, for a few others, would you mind giving a quick intro?
Well, I am the CTO of Root Evidence and one of the managing partners of Grossman Ventures as well. And I've been in computer security for 30 years. Most of that time has been focused on browser and web application security. But in the last, call it 10 years or so, I've gotten much more into network and host-based security. And so Jeremiah and I founded Bit Discovery together. Most recently, we sold it to Tenable. And now we're working on a new service, which I'm sure we'll be talking about, called Root Evidence.
Yeah, Robert and I, a lot of our backgrounds map to each other. Founding companies, doing application security, attack surface mapping. Most of the time, we found companies, raise money, grow them fast, and sell them. That's what we love to do. We love solving impossibly hard problems. And we're on this new startup now. And like Robert mentioned, we moonlight as a venture capitalist since we're not always already incredibly busy. So we we've been on boards, advisors, and things like that. So we started to do more and more angel investing and formalize it. So we like helping founders a lot.
Perfect. No, very good. Very good. Yeah. So like today we are going to discuss more and more about like security and how are you guys solving the problem pertaining to security in terms of like AI is everywhere and how security is getting more and more relevant in AI age, right? So Jeremiah, I am great fan of your theory, like epoch. So would you like to talk more about that theory and then we can go from there?
Sure. This is actually a mental model to predict the future of cybersecurity. And I'll go through it a little bit, but it's something that Robert and I have been refining over many, many years because we became pretty good at predicting what was the next phase of cybersecurity. So we were there at the beginning of the application security world. I went over to Sentinel-1 right at the beginning of the evolution between antivirus and ED. And I was anticipating that ransomware was going to come. Of course, it did. We were there at the beginning of attack surface management, and we made many predictions all along the way. And we were trying to...
Jer's forgetting a few. I mean, White Hat and the whole idea of warranties, and there's been a bunch of these.
Yes, and you came first with the lecture about XSS.
Yeah.
That's which you discovered.
A bunch of, we've done a bunch of different attack techniques, what the adversaries were likely to do, roughly when, and, just refining the mental model. It was less about, it's fun and nice to be able to predict the future, but it's much more useful to everybody else if you give people a roadmap and how we arrived at those conclusions, because we can be wrong, we can get our timing wrong. But if we give other people our mental model, they'll be able to anticipate things like we do. And the whole idea is that the adversary is what we're trying to guard against. The adversary wants to break in and has a motivation. They have thoughts, preferences, just overall motivation, and they respond to incentives. And in the financially driven adversary will only work as hard as they have to meet or exceed the adversary. And so one of the ideas is if the adversary is ahead of defense and defense rises to meet them, the adversary has a few choices. The first one is that they can innovate in that same channel attack to leapfrog the defense. They can choose different targets in the same vein, ones that are, down, not so sophisticated. They can also choose to go to a different style of attack, rather than, let's say, phishing, they move to AppSec or something like that. And the final one is, which they generally don't do, is they can stop. So what we try to do is a win in cybersecurity is force the adversary to shift, force them to innovate rather than scale. So to kind of walk through an early example of that, in the late 90s, early 2000s, the world was adopting firewalls because everybody was attaching to the internet. So
Yep.
they had default denied network firewalls everywhere, block all ports except 80 and 443. So the theory was at the time that it was only a matter of time before the adversaries moved to the application layer because that's where the value was. They were easy to hack, and that's where the value was. And White Hat was born in that time because we saw that shift coming. And so that's what we did. At some point, we knew that AppSec was going to get sufficiently secure, not solved, just sufficiently secure to cause a shift. Then they went to identity-based attacks, phishing, ransomware, extortion, and things like that. So that was the general concept of the epoch theory of cybersecurity. And we identified it as a 4-phase evolution that you can apply to different times and different channels of attack.
Got you, got you. All right. And then, so that's a great theory. And I would say it's a classic theory because it is like almost timeless. So how basically you think we can apply even more when everyone is talking about AI, right? So everyone is anxious about what will happen to security after agents will run everywhere.
Robert wrote the book on the topic of AI.
Yes, Hansen and here, right? That's the book that Robert wrote. And my question was very similar. Is it still exactly applicable? Is it
It's
still
very,
the
very
same?
close. Yes,
Mhm.
very close. There's a couple minor things. If I were to rewrite the book today, Gemini exists now, so some of the names are slightly different.
Mhm.
I'd probably add like 4 or 5 paragraphs and change about 4 or 5 paragraphs, but it's not like the world has really moved on. What's really proven out to be very true, though, is nation states have started to embrace it, and
Yeah,
there
we
is an
see that.
arms race. And with the war that's going, a couple wars going on right now, actually. Your war in Ukraine
Yes.
versus Russia, and then kind of most of the Western world against Iran. I think that's really proving out that the alignment theory is incredibly impossible. There's not one single country, like even Switzerland, it's just truly neutral and friends with everybody. I mean, there's just no such thing. So it's very difficult to build an AGI system that has everyone's best interest in heart, moving the entire species forward and all that stuff. So it's a lot of academia wanting things to be true that just I don't see a path forward. But if you want to get better alignment, you need to focus more on building really good training sets and helping it learn in the same way I think that humans learn, which is really slowly, actually. It's a lot of trial and error. It's allowed to make mistakes. It gets punished for those mistakes, but it's allowed and continues to grow and get better and better and better. We're quite a ways off, I think, from true AGI still. We have a lot of things that kind of seem like AGI, but not we're not quite there yet.
So
That's your theme in the book, that you want to be friends. You want to be say a brother maybe to AGI. So does that change because there are also multiple agents nowadays, just a proliferation of agents and agentic framework?
Yeah, since they aren't really AGI, they don't really have that concept built into them yet. They don't have sort of in fact, one of the biggest problems with AI is it doesn't have long-term memory. So it's hard to be friends with something that forgets who you are every time you restart a session. But once that gets solved, and there's a lot of really smart people working on long-term storage and increasing the token length of the context window and that kind of stuff that will greatly improve the chances of it acting more like a human acts, where it has long-term memory and acts, with all of the sort of prior knowledge that you would expect to have after a conversation. A compactification of the context window is a little how humans work, but not exactly, because we're really good at remembering very important things, where LLMs just kind of throw certain context out the window, some very important context out the window. But also humans are forgetful. So sometimes we make mistakes too. So there is something to all of that line of thinking that isn't terribly disassociated with how we as a human seem to operate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Ashish, I
then you
interrupted you. You were saying something very
Yeah, no,
important.
that's okay. So I was just more onto like RSnake, like basically you spoke lot about scoring system and how that is more of like is not relevant even then and now. So you feel that we still need any scoring system completely different though, but some sort of scoring system is required at least for the people who are learning security. Do you think that would be helpful at least for the learning purpose?
So we're switching topics here, pretty hard left turn here.
Yeah.
So this is about for those who don't know what we're talking about, CVSS base scores as an example. So in fact, Jared and I had a kind of a long talk about this. I don't know, maybe yesterday or 2 days ago. I can't remember. Where it's sort of like we grew up in an era before all of that. Like I remember there was no such thing as Nessus. You know what I mean? Like like these things that did scoring didn't exist. And gradually they came on the market and they were bad, but close enough, I guess, someone's subjectivity, saying it's high or critical or whatever. And CBSS came about and that started doing the same thing. And so, but I remember a time when that didn't exist. And so I guess I get to be the kind of person who gets to say it was never good in the beginning. It was what best we had,
Okay.
but it was never good. And so I'm not married to it. But a lot of people have grown up with that's the only thing they've ever
Right.
seen. And so they're just assuming that it's always been there as long as they've been around. And so therefore it's good. It isn't good. It was never good. It was a stopgap because we didn't have enough information about what the adversary is really doing. And so, yeah, I don't think there's a ton of value in scoring systems, maybe even negative value because it implies something that you don't know to be true. That said, I do think there is value in CVSS vectors. I do think the vectors are useful because that gives you context of what kind of vulnerability it is. But I really don't like CVSS base score. In fact, I don't think it should exist. I think it really should not exist at all. In fact, I don't think the calculator should function unless you enter information about your environment into it, because then it's much more. It has context enough to tell you whether this is a high or low. Otherwise, there's no way that it's going to get it right. It can't possibly know. Basically.
So what Robert was saying here is pretty important. We predate scanning tools. We predate not just scoring, but scanning tools themselves. And there was a time, and most working in this field will not remember this time, where you really could test, if not scan for all vulnerabilities and reliably fix them because there wasn't that many. Attack surfaces grew, number of vulnerabilities grew. And what happened was we got too many vulnerabilities to fix in general. We just couldn't do it. So we had no choice but to prioritize. That word priority became, since we can't fix everything, what do we do? And then scoring systems came out as a way to try to figure out which ones to prioritize. And it was largely a guess. We guess these ones are the ones we should fix to keep our systems from being broken into. And we had to guess because there was no actuarial data. We had no idea what the adversary was breaking into, in what types of systems, with what regularity. So all we really had was technical severity. This one leads to root. This one is this hard. That one is that hard. And that's it. And the reason we know a lot of the scoring mechanisms just aren't working is because the adversaries are using CVS fours, sixes, not nines, not tens. And they're using very, very few of these to cause us harm. So we think the scoring models had their use. It was a nice attempt, but the more actuarial data that we get, the less useful the scoring models will be.
Yeah,
And that's
and I don't
awesome.
want to completely throw away the concept of some vulns are worse than others because that it in fact, I had a theory that if you took the amount of vulnerabilities in CVSS critical, and so call it like 50,000 or whatever the number is, 30,000, 50,000, whatever the number is, and you randomly chose 50,000 things to fix amongst the population of CVEs versus only fixing criticals? Would you fix
Right.
more or less vulnerabilities that have led to a claim? And it turns out you do fix more by about 2.5 times, 2.6 times, I think. But you're doing approximately 50,000 too many tasks to get there.
Mm.
So it's
Right.
like, while it's true, it's missing, it's not true enough to make it valuable. And that's the problem. Like, you just end up doing way too many fixes for a very, very small amount of things. And then worse yet, like, that's all bad. But what makes it worse is there's so many that are below CVSS 9.0 that are actually being used that lead to loss. And so at that point, forget it. It's
Yeah.
like you're already compromised and you've done too much work to get there.
Well,
Yeah.
let's put a fine point on it. Let's say a company, and it's not abnormal for them to have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of vulnerabilities per year. What does it cost them? Not find, but what does it cost them to fix that many vulnerabilities and compare the cost of fix to the expected losses in compromise? We might be spending more on fixing than we stand to lose if we don't. That becomes problematic.
Yeah.
You know why it's
Yeah.
very important to me is because I teach that. When I teach it, I present a very glossy picture. Dear students, this is tried and proven method of securing yourself. But what you are telling me from the trenches, that's not exactly true at all. And you mentioned that you think that it's much more bad programs design the agentic systems that then hack them rather than the real adversary, which I'm waiting to teach in my course. So could you tell me more about that?
How best to describe this? Let's start here. We'll dig into your question a little bit deeper. What is the point, let's say, of vulnerability management? What is the point of cybersecurity? We're not meant just to spend money in cybersecurity as a moral crusade, security for the sake of security. We're trying to prevent a bad person doing a bad thing to some victim. And there's an economic model in there. We don't have infinite budgets to stop a bad thing from happening. There must be a dollars and cents aspect to it. If I can spend $1,000 to prevent $100,000 loss, that's a good idea. But if you tell me you have to spend $100,000 to prevent a $10,000 loss, that's not a good idea. It's not worth it. But we don't really have that concept in cybersecurity at all yet on doing the analysis of, I don't like to call it ROI, but economic loss avoidance. We don't have it yet. We never had the actual data to do it properly. So we just kind of skipped over it and called it compliance. That's it.
Yes,
So,
yes.
so that's I would say that's probably the first part of your question.
Yes, and I was investigating what you're saying with AI, of course, and it doesn't even know the new thoughts. It's still trained on the old way of CVSS and get the numbers and fix stuff. But you're saying something very new.
Yeah, Robert and I, we get to talk with a lot of forensics investigators looking for actuarial data, lots of insurance carriers that price the risk. And I plan to put a blog post up in, relatively soon, looking at this particular problem, which vulnerabilities matter. But the crux of it was most any enterprise you talk to, they are buried in more vulnerabilities than they can fix now or ever. Absolutely buried. But at the same time, the insurance carriers are writing policies for these companies knowing they're buried in vulnerabilities. Now, here's the question. Are they naive or do they know something cybersecurity doesn't? And I would say the carriers have skin in the game. They pay out when they're wrong. Cybersecurity doesn't. So let's keep that in mind.
Yeah, no, perfect. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, totally different tangent because I am coming from the consulting background, right? And then most of the times when we talk security with the clients, the first question they would try to answer is like how vulnerable this system is. What are some of the threats? So they are inherently looking for some sort of scoring system. So in root evidence, how you guys are solving that particular question if it comes from client?
There are in this way, this is how we approach it. Then the way we think everybody should start prioritizing, start fixing the vulnerabilities where there's evidence of exploitation, the adversaries are using it, and evidence of financial loss. Because a breach is not a financial loss. Those are two separate things. So we think the ones that we know for a fact there's evidence of financial loss, you go after those first. As it stands currently, there's only a few hundred of those that the world is aware of. And we've been searching for these vulnerabilities for years now. The second, once you get rid of those, and it all comes down to, let's say, patch capacity, remediation capacity, the next ones are the vulnerabilities where there isn't evidence of financial loss, but we see the adversary starting to use it. Fix those next. And those can be referred to as KEV vulnerabilities, the known exploited vulnerabilities. Could be CISA KEV, VulnCheck KEV. There's lots of KEV lists out there. And then the one just below that is everything else, where there's evidence that it could be exploited, but no one has tried. There's certainly no financial loss. So how far down the list? And that's where you get into the predictive models that we see out there. How likely do we think, can we guess the adversary is likely to use this? And if you do that, that's the most, we think currently, the most logical way to approach this problem, since we have at least some amount of actuarial data.
Okay.
And actually, to expand on that a little bit. So like, let's say you come to me with let's say I come to you with exactly what Jared said. And I'm like, okay, here's some assumptions we made, and here's some vulnerabilities we believe are being used. You might go, yeah, but this is on a site that doesn't matter. Or this is, defended in this very particular way that can't possibly happen or whatever. So you have a lot of context as a company that I don't have. It's one of the reasons I really don't like the idea of prioritization in general, because it implies that it's a lot of hubris built into that word. It implies that I know a lot that I definitely do not know. Instead, what if I just said, look, we disclaim these vulnerabilities. Like these are dangerous. We wouldn't want to take on the risk personally. Other vulnerabilities might lead to breach. So, again, we think those are bad, but we're not telling you to fix them. We're just telling you, here's all the information you need to know about these vulnerabilities. Other vulnerabilities are a high CVSS score, or maybe a high CVSS score in China, or maybe they're a high EPSS score, or maybe they're internal versus external. There's all these things you can add, context that you can add, and you're going to see it and say, no, Robert, you're an idiot. Like, I have to fix this because this is part of Project Bob, and Project Bob is super important to us. And so I don't know what Project Bob is. So rather than me forcing you to go change something, change how you think about things or anything like that, if I just supply all the evidence necessary for you to make your own decisions that you would already be making just with more data now, I think that solves a lot of, especially the bigger companies, it solves a lot of their problems because they already are thinking along these lines. So we just give them better data.
Okay.
Is that root evidence? That's why you call the company this way?
Where everything we do is rooted in evidence.
Then I had one very important question. You said that people are begging you to come up with governance so that what they build would be following well-defined rules and even enforceable in enforced rules. Could you talk more about that?
Sure. So right now, let's say it's a pre-breach. The CISO, the vulnerability management team, gets asked by the board, the executive staff, how are things? Are we secure? How are things going? And right now, in a vulnerability management context, that team tells the board, we have a lot of issues. We have fixed a number of issues, and we have a bunch more to go. That's generally what they say. They always ask for more budget to fix more things. It's an unfortunate answer, but it is generally the best they have. It's an activity answer. And what the shareholders, the business wants to know is, are we going to get hacked? Are we secure? It's an impossible thing to answer, but the only way they can answer is activity. And then, unfortunately, in the event of breach, the business goes, how could this possibly happen? What happened? And again, the CISO and the vulnerability management team can only ask, we fix a lot of vulnerability. We just got hit by one that we didn't patch yet. And that's the inevitable answer. It's just an unfortunate one. Where we want to get the world to, if you talk about governance, because we're not going to tell anybody what to fix, because like Robert said, they have far more context. What we could say is that when it comes to board reporting, we wanted to say we have fixed all vulnerabilities where there's evidence of financial loss. There's more vulnerabilities behind it, but we have fixed the ones that have gotten other people in trouble. That's one. And then in the event of breach, they could say, we had fixed all the ones that we know of that have been used for financial loss. The one that hit us, we were amongst the first that ever got hit ever. So we find that to be a much more due diligence, defensible position, not just for the security team, but for the company in general. You have fixed what has impacted the world. cannot, unless of course you take the position, we have to fix all vulnerabilities at all times. That's just impossible. So we think the diligence line is what has impacted everybody so far.
That's a wonderful answer. So that's a very practical answer that hopefully will bring the most benefit to the world.
We believe very, very strongly that the odds of getting breached after fixing those vulnerabilities is very, very small. And it's not to say that's where you stop. That is minimum, and you can go above and beyond to fix more kevless vulnerabilities. So you can fix the insurance carrier DFIR ones, you fix the kev ones. There's not that many of those. Beyond that, great. We do our best guess for the future, but you've fixed everything that we know of that's caused a problem.
And a lot of companies say like a majority or anything, but a lot of companies are not actually attacked by for-profit attackers, period, really. A good example of that would be like the oil and gas companies occasionally will happen. The water and power utility companies occasionally will happen. But these are very small claims and they're irregular. And it's because the people who do want to attack them are nation states. That's who's actually focused on those. So those are going to be your more kevs. You're going to see exploitation, but you're not going to see loss. And so if you think about them as completely different actors with completely different skills and desires and what they're going after, you're thinking more accurately about what the real threat model is.
So now totally different behavior I have seen, right? So people nowadays doing a lot of vibe coding and they are like giving prompt very randomly. And for example, they're trying to connect some application and then through the code. And if it is not connecting, they said, get this user agent password and connect me and save this in environment file or something like that, right? So this is more of a behavioral issue, and more clients that we are talking with, they are afraid of this kind of behavior. And that's the main reason they were even not using vibe coding. So at root evidence, are you guys like doing something? Do you think there should be some layer in between before data goes to LLM, something of that sort that will help, or like how to
Yeah.
address these issues?
We've spent quite a bit of time talking with a couple of very early vendors. This is all kind of brand new technology, really,
Oh, yeah.
but some very early vendors, one in particular that we like. It's called Ashuri for those who want to take a look at it. It's brand new tech, but basically the idea is instead of you having an LLM parent another LLM,
Yeah.
which I think is a terrible idea,
Terrible
all
idea.
kinds of bad
Right.
reasons. Like just don't do that. This is more like an RBAC solution. It acts as a proxy, and so you literally can't hit certain MCPs. If it's like a delete, you can't hit it. It's like an append, you can, because maybe that's allowed, or maybe it's time of day, or not this user can, but this user can. Like there's a lot of like compartmentalization and stuff that you can add on top of it. And it's got, it's very new tech, but it's already got some interest from some very large companies because you're now much more routinizing what it can do and what it has access to. So even if there's like other issues going on there and it starts going off the rails or whatever, it's pretty locked down. It's not going to be able to do anything, which means you can run OpenClaw in the most crazy configuration possible, but as long as it's using this router in the middle, it really doesn't have access to do anything bad.
And is it also, I mean, I just want to understand from you guys that sometimes I heard that clients are saying that rather than using this API key directly from OpenAI, you use from any cloud provider. Like, for example, Azure provides the OpenAI API key through its Microsoft Foundry, now they call it. So they are claiming that that is more secure than you directly using this, right? So is there any thought behind? I mean, what is the concept there? Is it because cloud is having their own security lying around these API keys, or?
I mean, that doesn't solve most of the threat,
Mm.
like surface area, because most of it is more about how you use the data coming out of the LLM, and if that has hallucinations in it or whatever, and or you go connect to the internet, pull something down that has some, you know malicious data in it or something that starts telling your LLM to do something, there's nothing the cloud's going to be able to do to help you with that. I think what they're probably saying is they have additional censorship models or additional things in the middle that they can stop certain activities from occurring, which I'm sure is solving some version of some slice of the problem, but it doesn't solve the crux of it, which is hallucinations and injected, like prompt injection coming from the public internet.
Yeah,
Okay.
from our perspective, we've been studying AI and using AI to detect vulnerabilities and things like that. And one of the things that we're noticing is that AI doesn't really change the game, what it's finding, fixing. It makes our problems 1,000x bigger. We're going to have 1,000x more software, 1,000x of the same vulnerabilities, those sorts of things. It gives us scales the problem in a way like nothing before. We're getting a lot of more software, a lot more cool tools, a lot more cool vulnerabilities, lots more attack surface, and then the rapid pace of deployment. Like right now, we're really pressed before to fit our security scan windows with between releases. That's going to be 1,000x, worse. So it's not so much we're going to have. I just think we're going to have much of the same problems, just 1,000x bigger.
Wonderful.
So
I just
yeah.
wanted to ask exactly that. How does AI change? For example, threat modeling. Threat modeling is different with AI. And you tell me the way it changes, it scales it. It's 1,000 times more of a problem. Am I correct?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, so I'll give you some anecdotes. So like I talked to like a PCERT leader for a very, very large company. You've almost certainly heard of them. And they're like, we get so many E's or, people trying to submit bugs to us or whatever, um, compared to like a couple of years ago that we can no longer really triage them. And 90% of them are garbage. But there is 10% that is kind of interesting, maybe even really interesting, but 90% is not. And so that means that his job has gotten, you know, orders of magnitude more difficult and not led to anything productive, or not led to enough productive anyway. And it's so much so he wants to put in some sort of like, let's have some sort of global rating of security researchers because so many of them are horrible now. Like, I just want to weed all of these guys out. And they're coming from many different channels. So I need to like not just Bug Crowd, but also, HackerOne and also Coming Direct. Like I need like this. If you see this person anywhere, like don't look at their results kind of thing. It's that bad. But Jared mentioned there's some companies that have hundreds of thousands of vulns a year or whatever. We've run into a couple that have hundreds of millions of vulnerabilities. And some of that is coming from like legitimate port scan, whatever, like it's finding stuff. But a lot of it's coming from like some LLM somewhere found a vulnerability in the sense that if all the stars aligned and you rewrote some code to do something bad, maybe some Linux package would be vulnerable or whatever. But like there isn't any exploit code out there. And even if there was, is probably not something. It's like root to get root or user to get user level access. It's not like a real exploit. And so they're just inundated with all this garbage, like this insane amount of garbage. And it's an increasing amount of garbage. It's not like it's like tapering off and kind of like normalizing. And so it's making it's creating so much work on the front end, not to mention bad code that also has vulnerabilities, which is creating new vulnerabilities, right? Like you have to actually manage these things. So it's like, it's creating all this upfront work that isn't actually netting to a safer company in the end. There
So
are
that is a
some
problem,
researchers
but
out
what
there
is the
that,
solution?
well, firstly, I don't think most of those vulnerabilities need to be fixed at all. Secondly, the ones that do need to be fixed need to be they need to be more accurately understood as to what they actually are. Root to get root is not a good vulnerability. Like some minor encryption problem on a site that no one uses is not a problem. Like, let's focus on the real issues. Some people are starting to say patch more, patch with AI. I think that probably is correct, but man, we are really far from there. It is one of the biggest back pressures you see in our industry with any sort of defense is people worried about outages. Like when we started doing like these different epochs that Joe was talking about, when we started doing scanning to see, or someone would do a pen test, like you're going to try to attack us. Like, no, what if you take us down, right? And so we finally got over that. Like, wait, you're going to try to automatic attack us from the from with a tool, like you're going to take us down. And then it's like, oh, you're going to do this from a SaaS software, or you're going to take us down. And so it's like, it keeps happening over and over and over again. It's always this fear that they're going to have outages. And so automatic patching is another one of those, like, you're going to get a massive amount of back pressure, and eventually we're going to have to do it. And then it'll be like everyone does it and it's not a big deal, but we're not I haven't run into a single leader I think is just like ready to pull the trigger. Like, let's just run automated software and go automatically patch everything all the time. Software, hardware, ripping things out, whatever, willy-nilly. Like, no one's saying yes to that yet. So
yeah.
There's another way to look at it. Like we're talking about, AI has the ability to 1000x the amount of vulnerability findings, detection to some extent, and of course it'll 1000x the false positive rate. Basically what Robert's telling about. But here's the thing. If you look back, even just before AI, everybody was buried in vulnerabilities for years. The vast majority of vulnerabilities remained open for a long time and were never, ever exploited because they didn't need to be. So AI makes that 1,000 times more, let's say. It didn't change the game. The adversary doesn't need to use AI. They don't need to, have one more vulnerability to exploit. The vuln volume doesn't matter. They didn't have to scale and use innovate and use new ones before. Why do they have to now? They'll only be forced to if defense meets or exceeds the 1% of vulnerabilities that matter now. And that's what we're working on. We don't need to work on the AI problem. We're not even fixing the ones that they're exploiting today.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Slightly out of topic, but there are some of the great framework in AI, like LangChain and LangGraph, and some of these enterprise CIOs are showing greater interest into that. However, they are sometimes held back because it originally started as an open source project. So what is typically you guys advise? At the one side, these are the great framework and definitely it resolve all the problems that they're facing, and other side there could be inherently some of these security threats, right? So typically in scenarios like this, what approach you take as an expert?
well, I think that's where the Ashish comes in that we were talking about earlier. If you have a router that's really controlling what everything can happen, and that particular machine is locked into just using that router, it's pretty limited to what it can do. I mean, it might be able to mess up the local hardware, but it's not going to be able to run a ripshot across your network and do all kinds of horrible things if you have a basic understanding of network security and creating a router. So that would be my recommendation. It can do anything it wants, but it has to go through this router.
Yeah. Right. No, makes sense. I mean, what I'm feeling is, right, working with many CIOs and then decision maker around this security and AI spaces, they don't have clarity in their mind, and specifically with the AI, I'm seeing more and more confusion. So basically, Jeremiah, I just went through your theory of epoch, and then the scoring system, like Snake mentioned, gives pretty clear picture. But most times people who are sitting in enterprises right now, I'm getting the feeling that no one knows anything, and everyone is like either very excited with AI or very nervous, and potentially it is to do with the data security that they are dealing with. So what is your message to those people?
Well, let's look at it just I guess the moment before AI. We had massive code bases, massive amounts of software, 2 billion websites. I don't think anybody knows how the iPhone works, let alone how the internet works. Like, we have massive complexity in our code. Does that get better or worse with AI? It just gets worse. Right now, you mentioned vibe coding. It produces code. It works. Good, ship, because a developer's job is most of the time not to ship secure software. Their job is to ship product that works, because no one's incentivized. Have you ever met a developer that was incentivized with their job, their paycheck, producing secure code, or just getting functional code working?
Just the functional code and deadline.
No, and that's how I usually start the class, guys.
Yeah.
We need to find something that will motivate you. But what is your answer?
My answer is for years and years, software liability. The reason developers don't care about security, so to speak, I overstate it, because the business doesn't care about software security. We have this thing called the end user licensing agreement.
Yep.
no warranty, no liability, even in software that's in your pacemaker in your car. Like, we're going to eventually have loss of life due to software. And the world is only going to allow software makers to circumvent liability for a finite amount of time. Think, not that I like lawyers, not that I like laws, but we don't have a business pressure to create secure software. If the business had a payout on the damage their software does to their customers, the business will say, we need security standards in our code for the developers to follow, not a moment before.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that summarizes really very well.
Let me just soapbox for a little bit more. If we look at the last to 10 years of breaches, 10 years of bugs, are we in this position because we don't know how to fix these problems? Is it a know-how problem or is it an incentives problem?
Incentives, I would say.
How do you technologically solve an incentives problem? You
No
don't.
way,
No idea.
right?
Yeah. So it's the pressure point is at a different spot.
Hmm. Yeah, make a lot of sense. So Mark and I are already designed the course, and we are always adding new and new aspects to it. So sometimes we feel that we are trying to cover so many things, and sometimes we are thinking that we miss a very important topic. But now, Mark, my understanding is based on these two theories that we are discussing, we can
Mhm.
always focus our course around those lines, and we can definitely
I
add
think that's the
real value
basis,
here.
the foundation.
Yeah,
It makes
foundation.
more sense to me.
Right. Yeah. Because
One way to think about this is if the product development team can somehow allow the business to sell more, the business will be listening. Right now, the product team, because we can deliver this features, this business value at this time. But the
Uh-huh.
customers are having to buy cyber insurance and suffer losses due to software that they buy from Microsoft or anybody else. If development can inform the business, say, we can do secure software too, and allow you to translate that value into customer value to be more competitive, that's what we need to do. Like right now, the customer is in this world where they've never known a world of software liability. Remember, like Robert was saying earlier, the only world any of us know is no liability. If we
Mhm.
can give permission to the customer to ask their software makers and they're certified for liability, it'll flow downstream. So I think we have to give customers permission, tell them that it's a good thing to ask for liability.
And we're already kind of seeing this happen in the industry as well. Like subrogation lawsuits are coming from these insurance providers. And if you're not familiar with that is, they can basically sue a vendor for false advertising that the vendor said that they can do some security thing and they couldn't do it. They ended up not
Oh.
doing it and it led to a claim. So instead of saying denying the claim, they let the claim go through, but then they sue the vendor for not holding up what they said they were going to do for that client. And I think we're going to start seeing these like more and more and more. And, I'm hearing wins of a very large lawsuit against a very large hardware manufacturer who made some claims about how things should and do work and they do not. And so I would be very worried if I was in product marketing or marketing and I had a whole bunch of, really bold claims. If you don't get that in check, you might end up on the other side of a lawsuit.
Yep. Yep. No. No. Perfect. So, any last comment? Any last note? Like people are basically using OpenClaw. So, any comment? Like, is it secure? How to secure more?
No, it's not secure. It's an LLM on a loop with LangChain effectively. Yeah, it's not. In fact, I don't even think it was coded. I think it also is vibe coded, which is even more interesting.
Yes, yes.
So no, I would not recommend its use unless you do a lot of work to sort of lock it in place, put it on dedicated hardware, limit its access in your network, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And then I think day before yesterday, I heard that NVIDIA has come up with the NemoClaw, right?
Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, there's a bunch of versions of the same thing.
Hmm.
Some of them are probably more well thought out than others. I guarantee you they're all vibe coded. So who knows? Buyer beware. There's even one that ships with an Apple Mini. So people are thinking about dedicated hardware for this, and that's smart at least, instead of trying to run it all in one machine. But even then, you could theoretically run it in a virtual machine as long as you have really good networking controls. So there's things that can be done there to limit it and make it less likely to do something horrible. Let's put it that way.
I was going to add is for the developers in the world, for the security practitioners, the opportunities that we see Robert and I see out there are massive. This
Mhm.
will this will take a moment to explain the setup. But right now, every product in cybersecurity has utility-based pricing. It seems like a boring subject, but it's in how many seats you have, how many servers you have, how
Mm,
many websites you have. That's how we do product pricing. And so all we see before and all we can see going further is more and more attack surface, which means
mhm,
more and more security spend. But
mm,
at the same time, what we're learning is that the financial losses due to in the event of breach have nothing to do with the size of the IT environment, nothing at
mhm,
all. It has to do with the size of the business, the type of information they have. And what happens over time is that the cost of security keeps going up, but the losses remain flat. And we're getting
mm,
to a point in many categories where the cost of security meets or exceeds the losses that we endure. That means the unit cost of security products is too high and needs
mhm.
to come down. And where Robert and I look at it, because we're entrepreneurs, we're founders, we're
Yep.
also moonlighting venture capitalists, is
Mhm,
that all the mainstay cybersecurity products that are out there currently, most markets we find that are up for grabs that can be reimagined, reinvented, and made much more efficient, especially in the light of actuarial data, that
mhm.
none of the big incumbent vendors are safe right now because
Oh,
we can
okay.
make products better, faster, cheaper for the more mainstream products. Those big companies can be disrupted in a way that wasn't possible before. So we want people thinking in those directions, like, how do I take on the big company? Before AI, that might have been more difficult and problematic. Now it's substantially easier with these new tools.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
a
that
very
agree.
positive message.
Yeah, very positive message. All right, gentlemen. Any last minute thought before we wrap up?
Now that was my last one. Getting everybody to keep build new product, better, faster, cheaper. We're gonna need it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. It has been always pleasure talking with both of you.
Our pleasure. Thank you.